This week on BussFeet Solved, we are going to be looking at the Central Park 5 case, a case so famous it has been called one of the most widely publicized crimes of the 1980s.
It is a story that involves its fair share of betrayal, innocence, and a dash of macabre.
However, before we can begin, let's talk about the events that occurred a couple months before the case.
On the night of April 19th, 1989, Tricia Maley, a white jogger, was going for a regular run at 9 p.m. when she was suddenly viciously assaulted and raped 300 feet from her Central Park roadwalk. She was not found until 1:30 a.m. the next morning, only found because of the path her feet made into the grass. At the crime scene, Tricia was found gagged, bound, and unconscious. Her skull was smashed in, and she had lost 75% of all her blood. She was so brutally beaten that the first policeman at the crime scene claimed she was beaten as badly as anyone I've ever seen beaten. She had looked like she was tortured. The only evidence found at the scene of the crime was a sock and inner shoe sole. There was also no sign of an accomplice. Now, let's get into the case. Earlier that night, reports began at around 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. on attacks against 8 people by a gang of teenagers. Keep in mind, these attacks have no correlation with Tricia Maley. A search party was dispatched to find these mischievous teenagers. However, by an unfortunate stroke of luck, the search party stumbled upon the body of Tricia, and the search for teenagers tightened. By the next day, on April 20th, 1989, dozens of teenagers were brought in to be interrogated. However, only 5 were charged with the assault on Tricia. These 5 were Corey Wise, Antron McRae, Kevin Richardson, Raymond Santana, and Yusef Salam. These 5 young men would eventually become known as the Central Park 5, and in the aftermath of the arrests, each would be interrogated for at least 7 hours before confessing to this crime that they did not commit. On one occasion, Yusef Salam was falsely told about the fingerprints on the victim's clothing, causing him to confess, in fear of what may happen if they matched. He was also threatened, as he said many years later, quote, "I would hear them beating up Corey Wise in the next room, and they would come and look at me and say, 'You realize you're next?' The fear made me feel really like I was not going to be able to make it out," end quote. As their confessions came out, the senior police called a press conference on the case, and soon, news companies began printing ruthless articles on the case. Although they were still minors and could not be named, newspapers such as the Philadelphia Times disregarded this policy. Due to this, their families received death threats as the whole country waited for the trial to begin. With that, let's get into the trial. There were 2 trials, one for McRae, Salam, and Santana, and the other for Wise and Richardson. Each of the 4 youngest received the maximum 5 to 15 years in juvenile facility, and Wise, who was 16, was tried as an adult, was sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison. After the verdict, Corey Wise was reported as saying, quote, "You're going to pay for this. Jesus is going to get you. You made this up," end quote. However, the time the young men spent in juvie in prison led to an interesting turn. While serving in juvenile detention, 3 of the 4 youngest each received a GED as well as an associate's degree. Meanwhile, Corey Wise, while in prison, faced such violence, he constantly asked to have extended stays in isolation, as well as requesting to switch prisons in hopes of better conditions. It is during one such switch to the Auburn Correctional Facility in upstate New York where he met the serial rapist Matthias Reyes in 2001. It is said, upon meeting with Wise, Reyes was moved to confess that he was the sole perpetrator of the rape and brutal assault on the night of 1989 when he was just 17. This, combined with new technological research, confirmed Matthias Reyes as the one and only person to assault Maley, and all charges against the Central Park 5 were dropped, allowing them to finally move freely as functional members of society. Although that was a bittersweet ending, a similar crime by the name of the Mockingbird case contains some eerie similarities. In this case, a black man by the name Tom Robinson was falsely accused of rape. These similarities include only colored men being prosecuted, the unfair verdict, the white prosecutors, and committing a crime against whites, as well as a claim that they raped the person. Detail-wise, however, the case is also different on many other levels, such as the number of defendants, as well as the verdict that went into the case. The jurors in the case of the Central Park 5 were also of mixed races, with 4 blacks, 4 whites, and several others, while Tom Robinson's jury consisted only of all white men. So, while starting as a nationwide terror of rampaging colored boys on a white woman, the Central Park 5 case will stand as a testament to the certain cases of the injustice of the justice system. And as for the Central Park 5 case, it will, and may always remain, solved.